Hello, and welcome to the Digital Indigenous Storytelling Project. In this series, we will be interviewing Indigenous individuals who live in Missouri and having them share a story about themselves and their culture. My name is Eric Pinto. I'm Choctaw of Mississippi and Zuni of New Mexico, and a project coordinator for the Catherine M. Booter Center of American Indian Studies at Washington University in St. Louis. In this segment, I'll be interviewing Janeé Kassanavoid. Janeé, thank you for participating in this project and sharing your knowledge and culture with us. Can you start us off with your background and sharing more about yourself?
Yes, I am Janeé Kassanavoid, and I'm from Lawson, Missouri, population 2,000. I'm currently in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as a professional athlete training for Team USA track and field. And I am excited to talk about my native culture.
Just kind of talk about what things that you're kind of doing right now, where you're at, and that'd be great.
Yep. So currently in Baton Rouge, I am training for the Olympics, training for world teams with track and field and hammer. And with that, I am trying to advocate for Native youth or any Native with health and wellness, trying to promote fitness and living best quality of life. Interest in dietetics. I have a bachelor's in health and nutrition and dietetics, working towards an internship to get certified. With that, I hold my culture and my ethnicity close to heart as like a why I do what I do. Just to show anyone, don't give up, go for your dreams. You can do anything you put your mind to. And I would like to represent the Comanche Nation on a professional, international, world level. So that is something that is instilled in my blood and that I also am still learning about and growing for.
Nice. That's awesome. So you spoke about how you have a background with health and wellness and fitness. Mm-hmm. What got you into that whole field?
Yes. So growing up, my father was diagnosed with diabetes and passed from cancer. And so with that, it grew an interest into health and wellness and learning through school and in college, taking those professional classes. Native Americans actually are one of the highest prevalent in diabetes and obesity and things like that. And a lot of it resides either in Native communities, but all across the world, it's very prevalent, and that could be related to conditions we're put in or conditions, we just naturally put ourselves in. But that's all related to alcoholism and just like a way of life. And so I think for me, seeing it firsthand with my father and, maybe wanting better for myself or to promote to others, to be better and be healthier, that was just a huge push for me and a passion to learn more about and study so that I don't essentially live in that way to either contract liver cancer, through alcoholism or obesity, just trying to be healthy and promote health and wellness to others. So, or like communities that have low resources or education about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I totally understand where you're coming from. Like my father, he had, type 2 diabetes, and, he had problems with, hypertension, and I believe so did my grandmother, and my grandfather, he passed away of cirrhosis. So that, similar to you, I got into exercise science and became a personal trainer. Right. And it was the same type goal. It's like, I want to kind of, provide more education and accessibility to other Indigenous people that may not have that knowledge or have those resources to, help them out on that type of level. So I like where you're coming from on that. And then have you, so did all that kind of also keep you more active, and that's like how you kind of ended up where you're at with your whole athletic career?
Yeah. So despite my father's health like that, I didn't really quite understand at a young age, and fully grasp in depth of what it means to be diabetic and insulin, all the sciencey stuff. But he pushed coaching in sports at a super young age. So that's where my competitiveness competitiveness comes from, like athleticism. Like it was driven from him, and like he would get out there and we'd be playing catch all day, or he'd make us go run like a mile or two in the morning and like not come back until we finished. Like me and my siblings, we had it like rough, but like I can only appreciate and like love like what he put us through just so that we could be like who we are today. So very sports driven, athletic, competitive family from the get go. So yes.
Did you play like all kinds of different sports or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I grew up playing soccer and t-ball, and then my father coached my older siblings. So I'm the baby. So my older two siblings grew up with softball and basketball. And so any team they were on, I was either their bat girl or playing, like wearing uniform and playing a little bit like older. And yeah, so they may have not liked me like following them around, but that's the only resources I had because I was younger. And so if I didn't have a team to play on at my age, I just played up with them. So it was a great experience, but also like I was super young playing with older girls. So I didn't get the playing time essentially. I was just like a part of the team. But my dad was the coach or like always took us to practices, or we'd just be outside throwing a ball, playing pickup horse or something like that. So yep. And then volleyball through high school, cheer and dance, and then track. And then now it's just track throwing specifically. So not much cardio.
So when did that all start, and when did you pick that up? And tell us about a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so through high school, my siblings Jaren and Jasmine did track. Our main passion was basketball, and volleyball we did for fun in the fall. But when track came around, it was more of like a social thing, something to stay busy, stay in shape, do something for the spring until the fall came back around, or summer training. My sister, when she was a sophomore in high school, she won state shot put with like a 42-foot throw as a sophomore. And so I kind of just looked up to her and was like, wow, that's awesome, amazing. Like, I want to do that too. And at this time, I'm like an itty bitty little thing, as the stereotypical like throwers most people think of are big, strong, muscular people. But so she did shot, and then my other sister did shot and disc. She battled through knee surgeries all through high school. So she maybe came out with 2 seasons total. She has the discus record. But she was all right, but it kind of stinks. The small school we had, we never really had like a track coach. So everything was self-taught, or you just went out there and winged it. Didn't have any specific training. And so I really looked up to them too, and competitiveness, had to beat them, even though the name would still say Janeé Kassanavoid. So yeah, I pushed for that. I made it to state 3 out of the 4 years in shot and disc, and then never broke the record, sadly. But what happened out of it was getting a scholarship to Johnson County, which had a culinary program, which was more of the passion route I was going towards, chef apprenticeship. So I did track and that and culinary my first year in college, which I ended up being really good at the hammer, which I had never thrown before, and the weight indoor until I got there my freshman year. Never knew what it looked like, never threw it, never saw anyone throw it. So I picked it up really well, became second indoor at nationals with the weight and first at outdoor nationals with the hammer. Got recruited by K-State, which still is the coach that I train with, Greg Watson, and successful 4 years at K-State, and have both the records in weight throw and hammer throw, and then continuing second year out professionally as a hammer thrower. So it picked me. I did not pick it, but it was also like my only choice for sports at the time. So that's what we went with, and we're here now. So even though I don't have the high school record, I'd like to think I'm better off where I'm at professionally with the hammer than my other siblings, but it's fine.
Wow, that's an amazing journey. And
yes.
For you to say like you didn't have like a coach in those beginning stages to really even teach you either, and you had to do a lot of this on your own. I think that's a really amazing, yeah. And then how would you think, how has like community or culture fit in, throughout that whole athletic career, and has maybe helped you out personally?
Mm-hmm. So essentially growing up in a small town with predominantly population white community. My family and maybe 5 to 10 other families brought in like diversity. And my father was raised in Oklahoma, full exposure to his culture and other natives, things like that. But when he moved with my mother back to Missouri, where she is from, his plan was to get us out of that environment because he kind of knew the like disparities being in a Native community, the resources that education is, and he, I guess, wanted better for himself and for us as children. And so with that, we didn't get the exposure at all to our culture or upbringing, pretty much zero. And so the only thing that we had to go off as was what we learned in school, which is completely washed or non-existent in a way of Native Indigenous people, holidays, and so forth. But what my father did an amazing job of being raised was we lived on 10 acres of land. We were raised like to garden and to take care of animals and hunt and things like that. Like I still have trauma of him hanging a deer from a tree and like gutting it. But amazing at that, and like just being exposed and like the upbringing of characteristics and qualities, and to be a good person and to like respect others and just represent yourself in a positive way. And we did that through sport. And so that was like a way of life for me and how I still choose to live. And it is my life, like day in and day out. I commit myself to training and to be successful, but I also have like a huge motivation from my family and how I was raised in that way. And like Native American is a huge part of who I am because like I have so much pride in that because that's my father. And even though like I lost him, like that's a huge part of my why and like what I do, and hope to give back to the community because I didn't get those experiences and those lessons of my culture growing up. So it's something I'm still learning and can want to continue to learn and grow and be a part of the culture today. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Like, yeah, when you're just not around that community, that I've explained to numerous people, here in St. Louis, like, the there's not many Indigenous people in St. Louis, and it's hard to connect, especially, I also have to explain to people that Native Americans, like, each tribe has its own culture and ways, and people think like a lot of times like we're all the same, but it's like we're the same on one level, but we're still very different in many other areas too. So even for like myself, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's like living here in predominantly white and black population, and with a school system that doesn't really teach you anything about Indigenous history and teachings, like it makes it so much challenging. So like you, it's like I will never view myself as like an expert. I think when it comes to our culture, it's always going to be about what else can I learn and take away from, how can I decolonize my mind,
right.
So could you and then kind of going off of that, like what were like some challenges that you kind of dealt with? Like, I mean, you kind of explained like the school system, and like, your smaller town. Was there like any other challenges that you kind of dealt with being like an Indigenous woman, like in a non-Indigenous community?
Right. There weren't too much off the top of my head other than just your classic stereotypicals, like fellow classmates or people I would meet from other towns saying like, oh, you live in a teepee or you live on a reservation. I'm like, no, you know where I live. Like, but it's just things that I kind of like dust off my shoulder and look past because I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, that's funny. But then like the reality is like not respecting my culture in a sense. And so that's why I have become so much more pertinent on studying where I come from and like my culture. But I've never had, other than my father and my relatives that we would go visit in Oklahoma, never had a friend or a colleague or coworker that has been Native to really like learn from and like gain insights and like kind of be a part of a community of my own besides like my siblings, and then we weren't having ties to our culture, so that was just the most challenging. And to speak on it, because like you said, like I'm not an expert. Like, yes, I didn't grow up in a very cultured, practical, like we didn't live the way Comanche people lived, and like not many people do. It's just I would appreciate, just knowing my history and all of the right things rather than like hearsay. And so I can appreciate things that I have gone through or things that people say, because it does affect me. But like I said, I'm still learning about Comanche Nation as a whole and just Native American history, and proud to be an association and like have it in my bloodline, and something that I really hold close to me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then have you had opportunities like, like whether it was within your community or throughout college, like where you were like, where you had those times where it's like you had to kind of tell like more like the truth, or, our side of things, versus like what they've learned or what they're taught, or what things that they're doing or saying, that's more like offensive or just not the right way of looking at things.
Yeah, there was actually a couple people, and I think right now being like 2020 and a lot of movements happening and a lot of people speaking out and like standing up for what they believe in or what they think is right. That's the most right now that I've come into contact with people that will either reach out about something I post or share, and tied to like my culture is like logos, like the Chiefs and the Redskins and things like that, and like them not understanding how it's disrespectful to our culture. And whether I am, 100% practicing my culture or super involved, it's more than that. It's like, is it right or is it wrong? Like just having a perspective and outside understanding of things like that. And just people being so like small minded and not open to like really seeing like what's going on and like how it is being represented to people of like Native communities. But yeah, that, and just I think people not being aware that Native Americans are still around in a sense. I get asked more times than not, just at the grocery store or out and about. They'll say, "What are you?" Or like, "Can I ask you, like, where are you from? What's your ethnicity?" And I'll say, "Oh, I'm Native American." Or, "Oh my gosh, you look like Pocahontas." And I'm like, I just, okay, thank you, and move on. Or the same Native Americans like, "Oh, I would have thought, you're Mexican or Samoan." But I think people just often forget about our culture. And I think because people aren't exposed to it as much. And so I think being a huge part in my position, that's what I would like to do, is advocate and promote and just make people self-aware of us as a community rather than like a stereotype or the little bit of knowledge they know from Disney movies or school on Thanksgiving, and making like a headband with a feather out of construction paper. Like I think there's a lot more that we could do, to learn and just to be exposed to all the great things Native Americans have done and will do and continue to do. So
have you ever thought about like going back to any like schools, that you grew up, that you went to, and kind of teaching them a little bit more about Indigenous people and history or anything like that?
I would love, if invited, to go back to my school of Lawson and either give speeches or give students insight on either a sport or like a graduation ceremony, entering the adult life, like everything being exposed to, and just like being who you are, being proud of where you're from and everything you've experienced, and tie it to like my Native culture. Like I would love that, but it's just when the invitation comes, I will definitely be more than happy to express challenges, experiences, my journey, anything tied to being Native American, being an athlete, or just being a citizen in the United States. It would be great.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you mentioned, about the whole mascot issue, and then your town is near Kansas City, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And
that is our sport.
Yeah. So,
Team.
yeah, yeah. Can you share with us like a little bit about that? Because I know growing up here, like, people would ask me like, my opinions on things, and I think at a younger age, like, I wasn't for sure, like, I didn't really know how to answer that. But it's like now, it's like I have a better way of explaining it to them. So yeah, I want to know if you could share, your experiences and thoughts and stuff.
Yeah. So I think my big thing from the Kansas City Chiefs logo and team, like nothing negative on the team, the players, the coaches themselves, but just representing and I guess supporting the team, being called the Chiefs. And in a disrespect to Native Americans and communities and like our upbringing and history of our ancestors, essentially monetizing our culture, and not just not giving back, but not like fully being aware of what the logo means and represents and stands for. The arrowhead being all Native American, and then like the Chiefs, people dressing up wearing headdresses and things like that, and face paint, things like that. Like, I don't believe our culture is a costume. And so just like people dressing up on Halloween. So yeah, that's just really my disrespect on it. And a company or, players essentially gaining money and things like that from us and not giving anything back. So I think that's just my point of view on it. And it may be right, it may be wrong, but that's just how I feel on the subject.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on when it comes to talking about like, the mascots like that. Like, I think it's ridiculous, like how these organizations and how the players, they can make, millions of dollars, and they want to utilize, our culture, utilize logos, and there's no sense of like giving back to those communities. It's like I always hear about a story of, an athlete or a group of the team players. They go to maybe an inner city to help out, children that, kids that want to play like football, for instance, but they don't have the resources or, accessibility to do all that. But the teams and the players will go in and assist them with that. But it's like you don't hear that same type of story with Indigenous people. And, that once again, it's like, Indigenous people, we're facing that invisibility issue where it's like a lot of the general population just don't know about the issues and the where Indigenous people are having issues at. And so I totally see where you're coming from on all that. And then it's really interesting too, like how many people they'll say, well, I'm honoring your culture, like, or I'm honoring the people. And it's like, well, that's your perspective, and we're the people, and we're telling you like this isn't the right ways of doing things, and the way that you're behaving, like when you're, being drunk and kind of acting like a crazy animal while, kind of portraying to be us. Like, that's, for us, it's, like disrespect. And but it's, they don't want to see that, or trying to understand it, which
I agree. They're like, they should be proud to have the name Chief because it means like strength and like warriors and resiliency. I was like, but they're not representing it in that way. Like, it doesn't say Chief's webpage, like, this is our mission statement. We give back to new communities, like everything they represent, blah, blah, blah. It's nothing. It's just, here's our logo, getting all the gains and the monetary values and everything's like that. But I've not seen from a player, coach, or anything related to the logo's bigger representation. So interesting topic.
Yeah, I was, because I've had some conversations. I have some people that live in the Kansas City area, and I've had good conversations with most of them. There's been a couple of them where they're like, they didn't want to see our side of things, and it was kind of hard to get through to them on that. So
it always will be.
Right. Yeah. Into talking a little bit about like your community and family.
Yeah. So really, like my family upbringing, it was like my father, my mother, my oldest brother Joseph, Jasmine, Jaron, and myself.
Okay.
And like we didn't have like any food related experience to our culture. Like my dad taught us how to cook like beef and broccoli, like that was his favorite meal. But like things that I hear or see, Native people like growing up to learn, like making fried bread and like stew and things like that. Like I never got that exposure to, or to like really have those heartfelt memories and like moments, like tradition with my father. Even visiting family in Oklahoma at times, like it was mainly just hi, and like their homes were decorated, in all uh, like Native culture things and like pictures and decor, and like we have a couple of those belongings like were handed down to us, but I guess because those people have passed, like I never had like a true like tie to that person and to like what it means to have this piece of clothing or this jewelry or moccasins and things like that. So it's like we have it, but like I would feel bad wearing it and expressing it in that way because I'm not personally tied to like upbringing and tradition and my culture. So it's something again that like I want to continue learning and gain insight, like going to speak to other tribal members or other Native athletes out there. Like I'm more than willing to learn anything that they have, or Comanche tribal members. I do want to have like relationships with people of my culture and just gain any insight possible so that I can feel, in a sense, more welcome, not like there's like the white side of me and the Native American side of me. Like I always classify as Native American and like how I always have, but there's just something missing. And so I think that's why I have so much pride and so much like tie to how I represent myself with it, is because like I just want to know more and I want to be more like involved. So
have you tried either kind of digging more into like traditional foods? Like have you tried like taking like items and kind of creating your own dishes, or try recreating some things that the Comanche people have eaten like throughout history?
right. I do plan on trying to see if there's any cookbooks out there or blogs of any indigenous people that have recipes or traditional foods. Like Native American style cuisine is something that I've been meaning to look into, and definitely trying it, and maybe doing a collab with another indigenous person and cooking a meal together and kind of just talking about traditions and our experiences and just, day-to-day interests and topics, kind of just to expose myself to something different. So that's something definitely I'm in the works of doing, but just gotta do it. Gotta reach out to people, and that's like something that I'm not comfortable with doing. Is just saying, "Hey, teach me, please," or like anything, any advice you have or insight. Like I want to know, I want to learn. So
Yeah, definitely. And I'll tell you this, like I think many of the people in Indian country, like they're willing to help out, others. Like, for instance, like I was in a virtual conference, the Intertribal Agriculture Council conference, and they had a speaker. Her name is Linda Black Elk, and she's an ethnobotanist, and she was talking about it was like the intersection of plants and food. Mm-hmm. And I just emailed her and reached out to her, and she came back to me, and she, I asked her, I was like, hey, would you want to have a meeting with me and my supervisor? And my supervisor, he deals with a lot of bee pollination projects, but also helping out Native tribes with like a lot of their food sovereignty projects. Mm-hmm. And so we had a great conversation because she was talking all about like, the different plants that we, many of them we think are weeds or, or just, plants that don't have any use, but really she points out like, no, like our, the people in these areas, like they would use that plant for, a specific medicinal use or, and or like food. And mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think definitely like you could definitely like collab and, even ask for assistance with like, what kind of direction you want to go to. Cause she definitely led me into a direction of where I want to learn a whole lot more about that stuff. And yeah. It does help you it does help you open your mind to like, there's a lot more foods around us than what we think. Because right. I looked like how she said, like, a lot of people, they think that they're in food deserts, and I think, or might have been Sean Sherman, but they referred to as like we're in culinary deserts, really. Like the foods are around us, but people just don't know like you have the foods there, and aren't aware of like those foods and how you can actually utilize them. You talked about like your siblings like a little bit. How like is your siblings like try to be immersed into indigenous culture as you are, or where are they at with things?
Not really. I think I just had a huge drive to find out more and educate and learn through my, I guess, position with athletics, and being not only wanting to learn for myself, but then having it was like native sports or Indian sports. Put myself out there as like, she's Comanche tribal member doing this and this, and congratulations, good luck, like exposing my face out there as a part of Indian country. And I love it. I'm super like thankful for that exposure. It's just people will reach out and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I don't have a huge tie, or like not super raised in a culture. So like, I think that right there was like a pivotal moment for me to want to know more and to like really love being a part of our culture, but just not knowing all of like maybe what I should. And so my siblings kind of just do what they do, and like, yes, we're native, and like, yes, we're part of Comanche Nation. But if there were yearly or annually like powwows for Comanche Nation, or any like conferences or anything related to that, like they wouldn't think twice. Me, like, I'm like, yes, if I could go, if I have time off at training, like I would specifically plan to go and be a part of that. Or if someone wanted me to speak, or if I wanted to hold, a food bank for Native athletes or youth or sports camp, like I am all for that. Or, promoting health and wellness to communities, or like a health clinic or a health department. But for them, I don't think they've intellectually like grasps all of the education that we don't get in school, and that I just realized is not there, like non-existent. And so I've never spoken on it. It's just something that I personally can like see and realize. But for them, like, yes, they're proud, and like, yes, it's a part of our father, and like that's what we all hold close to us. But they don't, take the time to learn or to even share being anything like native. So for me, it's just something I hold closer to me, and is like more of a part of who I am, tied with athletics and things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I have a
being
younger
a
brother.
woman, and it's like everything to me is just like, it's everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally get that. I get that same type feeling. Like my brother, he's younger than me, and if you were to compare the both of us, it's the same exact about you and your siblings. Like, it's like me. As I gotten older, it's like the best way I explained it was like, yeah, something is missing, kind of what you explained earlier. And it was like, it just seems like, I guess the way I put it is like, it's like my spirit was like, kind of, is like just calling for it. Like it wants to learn more about that stuff. It's like, it's always like kind of been in there, but I think at a younger age, it was hard to kind of like, well, how do I go about like getting more? But as I got older, it's like, well, now I have more control over my life. Like I can do what I want to do, and, and try and, figure out who I want to learn everything from. So yeah, I see where you're coming from on that.
A huge part is like, for me, is being in college and taking professional classes, taking even like a sociology class, like different sides of the spectrum. I just got exposed to like more information, and they would like mention Native Americans or statistics or things like that related to what the class was about. And I was just like, wow. But like people not actually understanding, like we are like a minority. We are a huge part of statistics still. And I think they just focus so much on white and black, which is not a bad thing, but that's just so like where the line is right now. And even in school, I was just like, that's what pulled me more towards like learning about Native Americans and everything like day to day things that they would talk about. And So that's what really like drove me to learn more, and like through classes, like my education. Yes, I have 2 bachelors, but and my siblings maybe have an associate's. My one sister has a bachelor's, but I think it was just the exposure and around a diverse population that really brought it out to me to be way more open-minded and like super thankful and excited to have, friends and teammates of different ethnicities, but also like different countries. And that was like huge for me. And like my growth from that was like amazing. And I love, I love people. And I think my other siblings were kind of just stuck in that small town mentality, and they didn't really get the exposure or essentially let that openness of diversity like come through in their like personal life. So I think that was a huge plus for me, like going to college and being exposed to different cultures and people was huge for me. The willingness to like want to learn from others.
Mm-hmm. I guess kind of backtracking, how would you go about wanting to like go back in helping out indigenous communities, or you mentioned youth, like what would you like to do and how would you like to do it?
I think specifically if I were to get just any high school or club, team, organization, just a group of kids that love sports and just hang out with them for the day, do just a simple hammer lesson and then just have fun kind of thing. Or maybe go volunteer at a food bank or a shelter or a restaurant and just, prepare meals for people that don't have the resources, or just to kind of save face, say, hey, like I am who I am, like, who are you? Love to meet you. I want to get to know you and know that like I'm on your side kind of thing. So start like that. Like it doesn't have to be anything super big and paparazzi, just, to help out anyone in any way that I can, I think would be huge and super fulfilling. I've done so much community service through college and leadership programs. Like I actually just want to get out there and help people and educate or promote in any way that I can. So,
yeah. So during this time, everything has become more virtual. Have you ever thought about like doing like virtual coaching or anything? I know you're busy and everything, but I didn't know maybe that could be like a potential like, new career goal or something.
It could. I am volunteer coaching for LSU, more so to train and use the facilities and not so much pursue a coaching position. But with my experiences through sport, it is very natural to coach. So I think more so like as an advocate for any Native youth, like being an open line to ask questions and, hear my perspective. And if any advice I can give to them is helpful, I think that would be huge, just to be a listening ear and to know that, like I support you. I'm always here if you need me kind of thing, as like an outlet. And then for any like adults, just to promote health and wellness, kind of like, I guess maybe a cooking lesson or different like programs or opportunities, outreach things to gain like food or any resources like they want to learn, education, nutrition, things like that.
Would you want to kind of create like your own like, health and wellness like website that, provides like coaching and like, maybe like, I don't know, nutritional plans or like recipes or, something like that. I didn't know if is there something out there like that for you or?
Yes, that is currently what I'm working on. I want to start my own brand. I have a logo that I'm working on currently, and I'm not technologically savvy, so I'm working on a website, possibly apparel in the future, but I definitely want to get a foundation set up, whether it's money or sponsorships or scholarships for school or just, assistance, like a little shoe drive or athletic apparel drive, anything that I can give back. It's not only Native youth specifically, but any kids, because I feel like that's super important to have a atmosphere and a welcoming like environment and push towards sports, because it can help so much, not only athletically, but other characteristics and traits in life that can help you. Being on a team or individual sports, like it really helps youth grow for life. So I just want to be a part of that in any way possible.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds awesome.
Yes. And then the brand page for like social media would of course, give health and wellness tips, nutrition tips, cooking tutorials, and everything like that. So super, super excited to put my education to use and then like use my platform as a brand. So
yeah, I would definitely like to, like, I don't know, like, because that was always like my future thing too, was like, what you were going off is creating more accessibility to like fitness and nutrition. Like obviously me, like, since I'm like, I'm a personal trainer and slash like strength coach. I want to do like more like, exercise, and because I've dove into more like CrossFit. I've done a little bit of everything except I think powerlifting, like CrossFit, strongman, like bodybuilding type stuff, like, so it's like, and then I think that's the other thing too, is utilizing like, what about for people that only have access to like gyms or like fancy gym equipment? Mm-hmm. What can you do, with that, So, for me, it was like always like it's like, I want to build like a website with something like that. But it's like, I kind of wanted to gear it towards native people that just didn't have access to like the gyms and stuff. So also too, like, like I have experience with volleyball and I've coached a little bit. So it's like, I still want to help out with like, volleyball players and stuff and help them out with like getting like scholarships. So that's why I was kind of asking you if like that was kind of like a thing, like, it'd be kind of awesome having like a story like, yeah, I helped out this, person that, they didn't have really a coach or anything, kind of like you. And, I helped them out, and hey, now we got another, native star athlete out there, so.
Yes, definitely something in the works. I'm just hoping that I can, with track and field, salary is not that great, but we're working on, anything that helps, setting up a foundation or a grant thing for myself, and then like, divvying it up to other people in need. So yeah, of course, it's always in the back of my head. I'm just trying to get myself established, and then those things will come. So
just get them sponsorships lined up,
Yeah. No problem. Easy. So yes, I am definitely looking out for native owned clothing brands, apparel, anything related to that first before I go, if the opportunity were go like bigger brands. But of course I would always mention, so there's like the Nike, the N7 ambassadors. So I'm looking into that, but I'm not sure how it works, but that would be something that would be huge for me, and like athletically, and being a part of something that essentially like supports me as a Native athlete and others.
Do you have any final messages or remarks towards Missourians or Indigenous people out there?
I would just say, from personal experience, just like be proud of who you are and your culture and like your blood and everyone before you. I don't feel that there's any right or wrong way to live, as long as you can respect, support, and like represent your culture. And I'm always learning, and I feel like I have so much more to learn, and I'm willing to learn. So I feel like if you want to go do something, being Native shouldn't stop you or make you more powerful to do it. But I think a huge part of like strength, resiliency, grit, and everything that, Natives kind of represent is who I am. And so I think that'll take me far.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you for participating in this interview. For the audience, we have other segments with interviewing other individuals that live in Missouri. Please check those out, and we'll see you then. Thank you.